I'm going to try and do a little blitz of various different topics and videos today. I've already recorded a couple of shorts with Ollie, my son. He likes editing them. I think they're shit, but sure, you might watch them and find them useful. This topic now, the first one of, I think I'm going to try and do 4 today, is on the topic of evil and the supernatural in Macbeth. It is an important aspect of the play. It is something they could absolutely ask about. I just want to go through some of the things that we're considering, okay? So we know this is really the witches. There's more than that, but the witches are at the core of it. And there's that very famous quote from Banquo when he first meets them and asks them, are they aught that man may question? They are of the supernatural. They are not created by God. They are the devil's agents. He calls them the instruments of darkness. And this was something which I suppose in the modern world we think of as being slightly, well, very few people would believe in the presence of evil creatures roaming the earth trying to draw us into our sin. But to an Elizabethan or Jacobean audience, this was not something that was strange, foreign or unusual. It was a core belief of the society. That's why you had gargoyles on churches warning people of the presence of these creatures from hell amongst us. I constantly talking about writing essays. Just have a plan before you start writing. This kind of idea of how to do it. Always have a thesis now. So if you're asking, the supernatural and evil are intrinsically linked in the play Macbeth. That's a thesis. And then in your opening paragraph, you're going to identify the key words in the question and you're going to build those into your thesis. And then you're going to have a plan for where you're going to go. So BP just means body paragraph or development paragraph or RIC paragraph. But I always, before I start writing an essay, I always, okay, I know what I want to say. What's my central point? What's my thesis? And then what are the points I'm going to make as I develop through? Okay? So Lady Macbeth, her link to the supernatural, the witches as in human creatures, the witches and their interaction with Macbeth and Banquo in Act 1, Scene 3, the witches and their famous witches brew with all the kind of creepy ingredients that occurs in Act 4, Scene 1, and Banquo's ghost and the presence of God. So these are all aspects of the supernatural in the play or relevant to evil in the play. Now again, we could talk about Macbeth's character too, but I'm just saying before you start writing, you remember I want to make 6 good points, 5 to 6 good points across my essays, whether I write them all in individual paragraphs or split those paragraphs up into A-B structure to leave room for that really important contextualization. But you're thinking before you write, so you have a map of the points you're going to go through, and you remember that you're not going to get hammered by an examiner for leaving out a point that they think is important. You're going to be rewarded for making pertinent points in an organized way, making sure that everything you say is evidence, supported by evidence, and that you present your work in a way which is easy to read. So that's the game here. That's the game. That's what you want, okay? Don't be worried about, Billy Teacher telling you, oh, you could have said this or you could have said that. We could all come up with more points, but you're writing against the clock. We're looking to see your knowledge of the play, your analytical skills, your structure and planning skills, and your ability to articulate yourself, and most of all, critical thinking. Okay? So let's just talk about various different aspects. Lady Macbeth, I'm going to finish off her mind map later on. Somebody came up to me on Saturday and said, do we know, there's everything we need in the mind maps on Macbeth? And I said, well, if you knew everything that was in the mind maps on Macbeth, you'd certainly know enough to answer whatever questions come up in the Leaving Cert. But of course, your wider reading, the summaries I've given you, the sample answers I've given you, the various different questions we've looked at, the mind maps contain the core knowledge, but they should be married to wider reading and wider thinking. Anyway, Lady Macbeth, what do we know about her? She first appears in Act 1, Scene 5, and she connects through her language to the supernatural and appears to be evil, the epitome, the personification of evil. And that's, of course, built around this famous quote, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from crown to toe, top full of direst cruelty. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visiting of nature shake my fell purpose." And of course, That's such a famous quote, but people ignore that word, those three words there. My fell purpose. Fell means evil. She knows what she wants to do. Her purpose is evil. And that's why she calls on spirits like the witches to try to help her. Sorry, there's a shine there from that lamp on my glasses. To help her achieve what she needs to achieve, or what she wants to achieve. But the crucial thing is, bloody hell. The crucial thing is that she says that she needs that help. So is she intrinsically evil? There's an interesting conversation to be had about her from that quote. We know that the witches are core to this, okay? We know that they are part of the supernatural, and we know all the evidence to show that they are not human, okay? I don't need to go through that now, but you have that there. There it all is, okay? We know that that there's loads of quotes to support our thesis that they are not of this world, that they are of the supernatural. The earth has bubbles as the water has, and these are of them. Whither have they vanished? So, they can appear and disappear at will. They can hover, they can fly. They can create storms. It shall be tempest tossed. They can predict the future, that Burnham Wood will move to Dunsinane and then Macbeth will be vanquished. They can read men's hearts. Macbeth will place his hopes above wisdom, grace and fear. And then, of course, they create this famous scene with Shakespeare. It was one of the most famous scenes in all of Shakespeare, where they stand around the cauldron and they chant. And now around the cauldron sing like elves and fairies in a ring, enchanting all that you put in. So enchanting, magical powers that they have to conjure up the apparitions. We know they represent the supernatural. We know they are not human. We know that their sole purpose is to cause chaos and anarchy. Great quote from the witches. When the hurly-burly's done. That's a great word, isn't it? Hurly-burly. There's Shakespeare making up words to suit his purposes. That's called neologism. And that hurly-burly is what they wanted. That's what they exist to create. Chaos. Why? Because they're the devil's agents. God gives the natural order, and their role is to try and disrupt that natural order. And that's why they tell Macbeth that he's going to be king, because they see him as being a weak person who they can manipulate, and they feel that through that manipulation they're going to be able to cause the chaos. Okay, and that's why they target him as opposed to anybody else. We know that they are the physical manifestation of the evil that permeates the earth. We know that is very clear from this opening. Fair is foul and foul is fair. That unusual troic meter. They speak in something called troic tetrameter, which essentially means that the meter that they use is unusual. It's the stress is on the first word rather than the second word, as it will be an iambic pentameter, which is kind of meant to reflect the way we speak in our natural stresses of everyday our everyday speech. But the witch's words, fair is foul, foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. It's creepy. It's deliberately created to be disturbing and unsettling by Shakespeare. We know that the story of the sailor's wife and the chestnuts and what they want to do to the sailor's wife is really important. And we know that they are vindictive and want to cause suffering. And this famous quote, her husband's too, Aleppo gone, master of the tiger, but in a sieve I'll dither sail, and like a rat without a tail I'll do and do and do. Now, I've already explained that quote before, but don't forget, in a sieve I'll sail, supernatural powers. Okay? We know that the witches are powerful, but their power is limited. And there's lots of great, interesting things about power in this play. About Macbeth as a powerful man, but fundamentally underneath that being weak. Duncan being a respected king, but a weak king who is betrayed and doesn't exercise his power to the benefit of the nation. Of Lady Macbeth appearing to be unbelievably powerful at the start of the play, but being revealed as being fundamentally weak by the end of the play. The witches having supernatural powers, but those powers being limited. Malcolm appearing weak, but showing resilience and strength at the end of the play. So there's even Lady Macduff's defiance of Macbeth's killers, as she tries to protect her children. You know, she has that power, that matriarchal power, which is ultimately not enough to defend herself and her child, but it shows that instinct. So I'd love to see a question to do with power on the exam. There's so many interesting things you could say, and you would definitely bring in this quote from the witches: "Though his bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest tossed." And that's one of the great metaphors of the play. They can create the tempest, they can create the storm, but they can't sink the ship. Their powers are extraordinary, but are limited. And that's a metaphor for Macbeth. They can create the storm inside his head by telling him he's going to be king, knowing that will, provoke this ambition that they recognize in him. And then they step back and they go, okay, well, what are you going to do now, Macbeth? They can't make him kill the king, but they can provoke that strong reaction. Okay, so really, really important moment. Great image, that, isn't it? Fucking hell. Shows the kind of, the way people in the past thought about like the evil and the presence of evil goblins and spirits working on our minds while we sleep. Crucially, the witches cannot force Macbeth to kill the king. They don't put him under a spell. If they do, he's a victim. He's not a tragic hero. What they do is mess with his head and exploit the weakness that already exists within him. And his free will means that when he kills the king, while the witches take responsibility for provoking him, while Lady Macbeth takes responsibility for helping and aiding and abetting him, ultimately he must take responsibility for what he does, because he can say no if he wishes, and he does not wish to do so. Okay? One of the most famous scenes in the whole play is this, and it's not a scene I talk about very often in class, because it's way down the list of priorities, I suppose. But that famous scene when they gather at the pit of Acheron, and that's a place in hell, Acheron, and they're called bedlams. Bedlams, they come together to create bedlam chaos. Hecate meets with them, tells them she's 40 heirs, she's going to fly. She says, I'm going to go out and cause pain. This night I'll spend unto a dismal and a fatal end. She tells them to gather their magical materials. Your vessels and your spells provide your charms and everything beside. It's really dark, troubling, kind of gothic scene in which Shakespeare's really trying to make the audience feel like they're in the presence of evil. So it's worth looking at. It's in your act and scene summaries, of course. And then, of course, you have the scene where they create the potion, and the ingredients that are put into the potion. And the ingredients are eye of newt and toe of frog, scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, liver of blaspheming Jew, finger of birth strangled babe. Look at those. It's horrendous. And of course, there's another image of child death. Finger of birth strangled babe. So they have the finger of a baby who's been strangled at birth, and they're using it they're putting it into their potion. So they are really frightening, scary, creatures, and Macbeth is drawn towards them, which is indicative of his corruption. Okay? Double toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. I know it sounds a bit hackneyed and almost comical to the modern ear, but Jesus Christ, it would have been so, disturbing and mesmerizing to a Shakespearean eye. I still think if it's done properly, it can be magnificent. And the recent, I don't know who directed it, but the recent production of the play with Frances McDermott as Lady Macbeth, and I think Denzel Washington as Macbeth. I don't know who the actress is that plays the witches. She's one actress who plays the witches in that. She does it so well. It's just really creepy and disturbing. We also know that the witches, provoke Macbeth's violence. So they say, beware Macduff. They don't say, go and kill his whole family. But when they say, beware Macduff, he goes off and kills Macduff's whole family. So there's a link there between their influence and his the evil that he that he perpetrates in the play. And of course, Macbeth chooses to associate himself with them. He chooses to do that. Banquo warns him that they are the instruments of darkness. Banquo warns him not to trust them. But he does, because he wants to believe that he is destined to be king. He knows, try and get this into your head about Macbeth. On the one hand, he knows that it's not his fate to be king. But on the other hand, his desire for that to be true overwhelms him. And that's what gives them their power over him to influence him. So the witches are the core of the supernatural. Banquo's ghost is, of course, very, very important as well. It is, of course, a manifestation of Macbeth's conscience. But it really also is, we have to accept that Shakespeare, there's a stage instruction that says, enter the ghost of Banquo. And we know from accounts of when the play was first staged, when Shakespeare was alive, that the actor who played Banquo came on stage as the ghost. And we know the ghost comes up, says nothing, and points at Macbeth, and none of the other characters can see him. And Macbeth's repulsed. Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me. If charnel houses and our graves must send those that we bury back, our monument shall be as to the maw of kites. Fantastic. Like, his horror is just, it's proof. This is a wonderful excerpt, cutout from a painting by Hieronymus Bosch. You never heard of Hieronymus Bosch? Look him up. If you want to see some disturbing art, or look at some Hieronymus Bosch paintings. But that's hell. Like, hell was a real place for these people. Like, the idea of going to hell was real. And Banquo's ghosts, the appearance of Banquo's ghost confirms to Macbeth that that's where he's going. So then that leads him to embark on this, murderous rampage where he's desperately trying to avoid, his fate, because he doesn't want to go to hell. Okay? Don't forget as well, when you're looking at the supernatural, God is part of the supernatural, and there's loads of evidence of God's presence in the play. Macbeth's soliloquy refers to the deep damnation if he kills the king, so he'll go to hell because God is omnipotent and God will punish him. When the king is killed, famously Lennox, who arrives with Macduff, says, the night has been unruly where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamenting's heard in the air, strange screams of death. And of course that's God's reaction through the natural world to the terrible, awful, heinous crime of the killing of the king. Macduff refers to the killing of the king as sacrilegious murder, and of course Macbeth knows that if he kills the king he will be punished. Even-handed justice. These are all important quotes that we've been through and hopefully you have a good understanding of. So look, that's a little overview, second overview of the witch's role in the play, but overview of the supernatural. I hope you found it useful. It's a good thing to be aware of. Remember what I'm saying to you, I've said to you all year, read a lot over the coming few weeks on Macbeth. I'm going to do another video now on the second half of Lady Macbeth, but read a lot of the the summaries and the sample answers that I've given you, and then to gather the information that you need. Really, I've tried to put that information as much as possible in those mind maps. So the mind maps are core to your preparation, but to reiterate what I said on Saturday, they are not everything. Critical thinking, essay writing skills, your ability to pick the right question to suit you, there are lots of factors that will influence your success or lack of in 5 weeks' time.